Alright, my delicious people. Welcome to another episode of Lunch with Gina. Today I have chicken katsu. I love chicken katsu. I love it. Also, yes, thank you, mother. So you might have whatever you have, or you might have nothing, depending on whether or not you wish to sit here, listen to me ramble, and eat, or, just watch Jorelli ponder your ultimate demise. So, when it comes to the topic of the day, being difficult games, you might be thinking, oh, you don't like difficult games, you don't like hard games, or long journeys, or salty tears. Actually, it's not the case in actuality. See, what this is actually the fact that there is a difference between difficult and punishing. So, the difference between difficult and punishing is actually quite simple, and I'll be using a couple other games to basically point at a bit of a situation where difficulty is not the problem, it's the punishment for failure. So, take into consideration the game Celeste. From what I can tell, when you fail in Celeste, you run into a situation where, yes, it was because it was hard, but you immediately get back up and try again. Because your setback or punishment wasn't too severe. You may have been set back maybe one or two platforms back if you know how the checkpoint system works. And so it's actually not too bad. But if you go to a different game that's also based on difficulty, that being Armored Core, now you have a situation where you might understand the difference being that Armored Core is comparatively just as hard as Dark Souls, but it is far, far more severe, the punishment for failure. So let's take this into consideration. If you were playing Armored Core, you will have basically spent a bunch of credits, getting a whole bunch of gear, and then you might have thought, oh, let me practice with this brand new piece of gear that I just got, and let's see if I can figure out how it works. Well, the problem is, if you lose the mission, you cannot replay the mission. That is devastating. Not only that, but you have to pay for your damages. That is devastating. Not only that, but if you continue doing this, it will actually set you back, give you a whole bunch of money, and call you a failure. Emotionally, that is also a punishment. Now you see why people don't actually like to play the game. And yeah, I too am actually a really big Armored Core fan, but I really do not like that. So let's look at Dark Souls as an example. Specifically, the difference between Dark Souls and Elden Ring. Elden Ring is open world, and you might think that doesn't very much make it to where there's a difference, but keep this in mind. When you're playing Dark Souls, specifically, not Elden Ring, but Dark Souls, you have a situation where if you lose all of your souls, you run into a situation where you have run into you run into a situation where you have to go a really long way across really difficult areas, and sometimes very unfair situations to go back and get those souls, which very much stops people from playing the game. When it comes to Elden Ring, you run into a situation that if it's open world, well, you have to be close by where you fell or you're not going to continue, which happens in Dark Souls a lot. So what ends up happening is it drops you off really close by, all of the save places are close by, and you can go around the enemies to go and grab what you're grabbing unless you're in a dungeon. But even then, the dungeons aren't very big. And the difficulty actually isn't that bad. It's just that people forget that difficulty does not equal punishment, and it's just that, if you look at how the bosses are made, it's very much comparatively the same when it comes to difficulty. Unless you have like a blood build against something that actually have blood, and then it's a cakewalk, but it's the same thing with Dark Souls too. Dark Souls also had those builds that were just super, super OP, so it's not exactly too much of a comparison. Now let's put this into perspective when it comes to harder games that are indie developer games that might be very familiar as well. When you look at some of the indie games, you realize that they are actually based on difficult gameplay. But because they are 2D games that tend to be quite short, you run into a situation where, you know what? You are not actually punished from anything. Like, it's difficult, it's hard to get by, but you could retry over and over and over again 1,000 times in like a few hours. And that's great because a difficult game that lets you do that allows you to pick it up, do what you're doing, and then continue if you fail. But now we're going to look into something that is extremely bad, which is actually a cause of something called punishment that is, you know, a bit of a problem. This problem is called gatekeeping, and it's really, really bad in a game called World of Warcraft. This reason why it's bad is actually very, very simple, and that's the fact that when you go into a raid, you have to have players that have to know what they're doing, due to the fact that if you go in there, you're spending hours there. And that's a different kind of punishment. It's not loss of resources, it's loss of time. So MMOs are extremely horrible when it comes to respecting your time, especially when it comes to the community itself, because they want the best of the best, and they need the best of the best, because in order to even get their rewards, you need to succeed. Well, how do you remedy that? Well, there's a way that it can be remedied, and that's actually in Warframe. Essentially, your missions are really, 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 really short if you feel like going there and going to the sea rotation, which can be like 20 minutes. Or maybe like if you're doing it really, really well, it's like 5 or sometimes 4. A sea rotation in 4 minutes? I've seen it. I know it can happen. So yeah, Warframe has that. The problem is, Warframe also has this other thing, where if you want to go to really, really long things like level cap or survival, you run into a situation where, oh no, I spent 3 hours in here. Unfortunately, the enemies have bent my lovely little Warframe over a table, and I can't get free, so now I've run into a situation where I have to sacrifice all of my resources that I gathered to make them stop fucking railing her. So, yeah, that's a problem. And that's basically where we come into a little bit of an impasse. Everybody asks for difficulty in video games, but punishment does not have to be in difficulty. But the problem is, some people only assume that punishment is part of difficulty. But you take into consideration the fact that people play games to pass time. If you waste their time or you waste their resources, specifically their time, you run into a situation where you don't want to play the game anymore. And that's a really huge problem, because difficult games are not the problem, it's the punishment that comes with it. And that's actually why I believe that maybe if you are like an indie game developer and you happen to come across this, maybe you can make it a little bit lenient on the punishment, but when it comes to the actual difficulty, you can fucking rail me. And I will see if that is true, because if I manage to be able to continue like 1,000 times in an hour, I'll probably be able to power through it and feel very good about myself. But the fact that I could waste an entire run, maybe like 20, 40, 60 minutes, is actually a bad thing because keep in mind, most people play games to pass the time. And if they pass the time and they don't get anything done, then it wasn't just passed, it was wasted. And that's the problem that a lot of people have, is that passing time and wasting time are two different things. To go back into MMO territory, I think one of the things that people should very much take in consideration when it comes to MMOs is that gatekeeping is a real problem, and that is actually why a lot of people stop playing games, is that they have not spent 1,000 hours getting a single trophy that is extremely tedious, so they don't get the opportunity to go and play with people even though they know exactly what to do, and they have done it in randoms before. Probably even more effective than any of the pros, which actually is a very common occurrence. So you run into a situation where it's like, oh, I don't get to play because people won't let me play. So if I don't get let played, I'm just gonna go play Fortnite. And see, that's another thing when it comes to multiplayer games. People play battle royales not because of the fact that it's a good game, it's actually, quite unfair and quite shit. But in actuality, it's not punishing because if you die, you literally could just restart in a completely different game with a different situation and a different scenario. It's actually like that with Exoprimal, which is a new game, where you literally spend like maybe 5 minutes on a game and you don't even have to win. Keep in mind, you get the same amount of experience to win or lose. Only a difference of like 10%, unless you're MVP, which is like 15%. So that's why Exoprimal is actually quite popular, because it doesn't punish you for being bad. It actually rewards you up to a point where it basically says, okay, thanks for playing, and I hope you have a better luck next time. We're just going to deduct 10%, and then we're going to give you the rest of it. And it's like, yeah, I mean, like, you know how many times I've lost and felt like I wanted to continue playing rather than quit? Last time I played an MMO, which I think was, what was that? I think it was DCUO, or DC Universe Online. I played a raid, and it took like 45 minutes, and we lost, and somebody needed to go like, use the bathroom. And after that happened, somebody's mom called them, and eventually the raid just fell apart, and we spent a whole hour in there, and we got nothing done. And so after that, me being one of the best healers in that game at that time, I quit. My top 10% league in there lost their best healer because they wasted my goddamn time. And I needed to have a game that did not waste my time. During this time, I got back into Warframe. And guess what happened? I could play Trinity, and I barely need to do anything because my entire team can take care of themselves, and even if they couldn't, I could literally just, get the rewards and bail with my teammate, who also says, hey, let's go again because I didn't get the thing I wanted. So, we go again, and we get the thing we wanted. It was pretty great. I love that about Warframe. I also have, like, inhuman luck, which is, I swear it's with witchcraft, but, yeah, if you play with me, you'll see how wild it is. Sometimes I even call if I'm gonna have a, rare, which is actually quite hilarious. So, to wrap things up so I don't get too ranty, let's get into our little summary. So, the difference between things being hard and things being punishing is the fact that difficulty is just how difficult things are, and punishing people is basically how bad you have been set back in your time. Sorry, I'm having a hard time with words. And another piece of the summary is games should probably focus on difficulty but not focus on punishment. And the last thing is this. Um, Pop in, pop out games are more popular because of the fact that difficulty is not a factor. It's the fact that you can pop in and pop out and not be punished for it. So yeah, that is my little rant, and I hope you had a really, really fun time listening to me do horrible, horrible things to my microphone, like breathe into it. I'm sorry, I do, I do probably should figure out how to make it not so windy. But yeah, I hope it was entertaining.